Welcome to another language tooling annotation. Operation Mountain Block. What the hell? I have been using a tool like this in the past where it was identified as a language fork. This is a visual communication signal to myself functioning as an audio-visual motif where the choice of the sound was equally important as trying to create a visual. My learning process was dependent on using audio as a learning cue, and that's why as I use this coder, my brain knows it's a signal saying take note, take note, take note, take note. I've reached a point where I have to create a more generalized variant of this language fork. Even though this language fork was functioning like that, this happened as I was studying Korean and there was a need to signal I've got a block. I've got a mountain block, I can't pass. There's no throughway, no throughway. It's a block, a solid block, you shall not pass. That sensation of there's no way through is truly inconceivable. Here you are the size of an ant by that little dot, and here's your Himalayan mountain and there's no way through. That's not an exaggeration, that's trying to express the sensation of blockage. There's no way through is so inconceivable. There's no space for doubt. There's just no way through, absolutely nothing. You don't have to question it, you just can't get through. And as for how I developed that signal through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of iterations where I became familiar with that as a sensation through my work. I can't get through, it's blocked. And so it's this recurring experience, there's no way through, there's a mountain there. No way through, mountain. Mountain, there's a block. And it need not just have to be a mountain, it can be a lake or a river system. I detect that as a geographical impasse. It can be an ocean, it can be a cliff drop. When I experience this sensation through processing language, this mountain block tool needs to function like a red button on my moon patrol car while I'm doing my roving. To signal back to the database, we've got an impasse, obstruction, docket on the map. And it's a signal to say docket and play go fetch. Just roadblock here, so I'm driving, I'm the ant. I arrive here through the language, processing it, and I face this impasse. The mountain block function is docket, mountain block, blocked. It's just a straight out block. Door. Stop. Dur, turu. Stop, go fetch. So, at this point, stop, play go fetch. Within a certain radius, yeah, something like that. I have to chart on the actual world map. It was here, issue here, scan the surrounds. Look for the mountain, look for the lake, look for the impasse. Look for something that causes the fork. So yes, they are related. Blocks cause forks. Blocks can cause other things as well, but this was through the context of a fork. I just see it. I've got my moon patrol, Türkürüğüik, scanning the terrain. I need a button. I see the button similar to that emergency light one where it's kind of like triangle shaped, like a mountain, and it's red, and when you push that, it makes your car signal with all the lights going on and off. It's like an alert. I need that in my dashboard, similar to the big red button, just like a big 80s joystick button that's about that big, or an actual stopper where I can just smash it with my fist while driving. I'm not quite sure how to have the steering wheel designed because I can see I need controls with my thumbs, perhaps for other buttons that can help. I need some kind of like a docket, and that signal, it's a block, and it needs a scan. So stop, go fetch. I need a tool like that in my navigational dashboard GUI, and that signal to also trigger a noise of sorts. And this is where if I come in contact with other rovers, there's a need to coordinate the design of how do we design the symbol to indicate mountain block. There needs to be a review on how can we visually communicate and come to a consensus. So this requires conversation about, okay, what sorts of things can we do to symbolize, visualize this concept of stop, go fetch. In terms of functioning for this tool, I need to go stop, go fetch, and then in that go fetching scan the ability to start identifying features. So all of these different features will be things like mountain, river, cliff drop, ocean, fucking huge tree, something like that. These are blocks that would block physical passage generally on foot. When you reach the impasse, there's no way through it, there's no way over it, there's no way under it. You have to go the long way around, or you have to create a tool like a bridge or a boat to pass. This is where the technology of those, we have to imagine you don't have that technology, and I see this scanning based very much on foot measures of foot, physical foot. In this stop, go fetch sequence, we're looking for things that would obstruct passage on foot. I think I've tapped in hard enough with the scales of magnitude, but I just want to reiterate the sense of the inconceivable. I can't pass through this at all. Also reminded me of the husband used to make whistles, boring, cylindrical pieces of wood. In terms of impossible, I'm looking at, alright, here's the center of my cylindrical shape here, and let's just call that stainless steel. I'm looking at a stainless steel cylinder here, stainless, right, where the radius here is 5 meters, but the length is 10 meters, or perhaps even 20 meters. We're looking at a 5 meter radius. Therefore, the diameter is going to be like, yeah, this probably has to be 20 meters or even 30. Similar proportion to a whistle where it's a long cylinder. Let's go for 30. Yeah, let's say that's 30 meters long with a diameter of 10 meters. I have to play with the numbers a bit just to make the proportion like a whistle, but what I'm looking at is a ridiculously, impossibly large solid block of stainless steel, and we have to drill a 1mm bore. Yeah, the distance of that is 1mm. Alright, and you have to make that bore equidistant, dead center. How do you go about trying to drill a 1mm bore in something that impossible? And the scale there is illustrating, why would you even try? We're dealing with that level of there's no way through. Sure, perhaps it can be done, but the amount of effort, energy, etc., the act of boring, something like that, is so, it's on the inconceivable end of the scale, and that's where it becomes, you don't question it. That's where the certainty comes from the knowing of trying to do something like that is just so inconceivably, why would you even begin to even think about it? And then there's like, okay, let's say if we did have to build such a thing, what would be more effective? Let's not go for boring, but let's produce the 1mm pipe and just build around it. Okay, and let's say we were able to build something like that, and I'm thinking at the end of the hole we fashion a little straw into it like a milkshake, and then we try to suck through that 1mm straw that's about, what, 30 meters long to experience like a McDonald's chocolate thick shake, hey? Imagine that. And I did imagine it where this inspired me to go buy a packet of Tim Tams and get a needle and try to bore like a 1mm hole through the Tim Tam and then use that as a straw for the milk. So that way you don't need to bite off the ends, you just suck it through that 1mm hole, and then you do that again. Instead of a needle, you use something that's more like a shish kebab stick, so the hole is thicker through the Tim Tam, and then you experience the drinking process. You use that one as a straw, and then you use the sewing needle version as a straw. For those who can imagine what it would be like, there's going to be people who are so hypersensitive, they're going to be able to feel how the scale of trying to suck milk through 1 millimeter versus something that's towards 2 to 3 millimeters, the intensity between the difference of those two is going to be so huge. You know where I'm coming from. I'm over here trying to find my way back home. Where the fuck are you? I think I've done okay trying to outline how there's a need to develop a tool like a foundational draft. I need it, and I've gone into the response to the obstruction, which is this go fetch. I'll just go fetch. Yeah, in terms of trying to discuss or create a summit to begin the conversation of how do we go about designing the symbol for that versus the audio, this requires a summit. I want to have that conversation with others to examine in your culture, how do you go about communicating block, impasse, no way through, can't progress, conversation that surrounds that conceptually. How are these things represented semantically, metaphorically, pictographically? We're looking at things like road signs. We're looking at ways to communicate nowhere through or some form of stop. What ways can we communicate that? Visually, but also through the audio landscape, where I can visualize what signals stop, don't you dare, don't even think about it, no way. What does that sound like in other cultures? I would love to see the spectrum of, okay, from this part of the planet it sounds like this, it sounds like this, it sounds like this. I'd love to sit through and listen to the landscape of alarms, signals that say stop, don't move, stop at the road, look to the left, look to the right, look to the left again, I think I got it wrong, which way was first, that kind of a thing. Stop, scan. And that, where I was experiencing a sense of, oh yeah, this summit, to have that conversation is important. However, I'm working from the landscape and perspective of my space over here, and that's for me to at this stage I feel inclined to just stick with the symbol I've been using since it was conceived, but aware that this language fork could be sitting in one of these categories here. I just saw the mountain block emerging as the, and no, it doesn't have to be a mountain, it's just a central block. But in the process of studying work that I did through the Korean landscape, it popped out as a mountain block. There's a block here, block. When I announced block, go fetch, to not be alarmed by it, kind of pictured it as if I had a network dispersed across the planet where, let's say I'm located here, my friend Sasha is located here, let's say another friend called Fred is located here. When I say block, I don't have to say go fetch, or perhaps later on down the track there is going to be a need to revisit sequences for commands like that, to mean this way, do this way, evaluate this way. I'd say people skilled with programming would have methods of this sort of evaluative if statements or whatever. It's a need to stop, evaluate and record. When I do a little ping from this part of the planet, ping located here, the outer, where I see it as like a Shakespearean amphitheatre, but it's 3D ball instead of just like a semicircle thing. 3D ball, ability to rotate this ball so you can get your own sense of center with it, your own point of origin. It requires that level of flexibility. But yeah, me going stop, blocked, and then people located on this side or that side of the sphere can hear the signal, hear the transmission, and also be able to work out from this part over here this was detected. And then yeah, it's probably some ability to coordinate, learn from each other, kind of see it working like that. And this is where I have to pause it here because that opened another Pandora's box while researching what do I call that, how can I signal that, where it started to examine how do other languages communicate mountain or a block or obstruction, impasse, how do they communicate and that needs to I stop that right now. This subject is finished in order to continue examining let's look at how other languages tackle trying to communicate this type of a concept through their language. That kind of a thing is how I picture the summit functioning. So I'll just stop this part, and if I'm feeling up for it, I'll do a brief rundown on my experience of how the summit type of function evaluative. Is it an evaluation, or it's like more like a consolidating review of the everything's everything summary, checkpoint, checksum, something like that, where through that continuing exercise to try and communicate how I visualize the summit, I can do a rundown on how that looks like through the Turkic landscape, and then extend that further to show how it outreaches into the other lingos.
Bir şiir daha var, okuyayım mı? Yeter! Adım Ayşe! Get used to it!